Buongiorno, buonasera, benvenuti amici. Welcome my friends. My name is Vincenzo and welcome to my channel, Fountain Pen Therapy. I've got an absolute bomb of a video for you today, folks. I just hope you appreciate what I'm going to be doing in the next couple of minutes. It's a long video. You can timestamp it if you want, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, as some of you may know, if you've been watching my channel, I went to Italy this summer and visited Stile, a retailer in Rome, and I purchased several pens, most of which I consider Grail pens. And one of those pens was this beautiful Magna Carta Mag 600. Now, we all know that this is indeed a special pen. I would say to you that when it all is said and done, when we look at the entire spectrum of fountain pens, and I don't know if this pen came out in 2024 and 2023, I forget now, but at least this version of this pen, to me, this is the pen of the year. If it wasn't declared to be the pen of the year in 2023, I'm going to declare it as my pen of the year 2024, unless something happens between now and December the 31st, okay? So this pen has absolutely obsessed me for the last several months. Right from the get-go, when I got this, I was on a cruise. We landed in Rome, spent a few days there. I bought this pen and I immediately started writing with it, and I haven't put it down since. But what it's led me to do is to compare it to all other possible flex nibs that I could gather. And I'm not saying I have them all, but I have a bunch. And what I propose for you today is not a simple template, review, how many, how big is it, how small is it, what's its girth, what's its length. I mean, we'll forget about all that. There's many reviewers that have done that already. I'm going to discuss just briefly the version of this Mag 600 that I have and the possible versions that are out there. And then I'm going to take you for a ride. And it's going to be a writing sample ride of all my flex nibs. We'll compare, we'll have some fun, and maybe you can draw from this other flex nibs that you may appreciate. And I'll give you my ultimate choice at the end of the day, including gold, titanium, or steel, and we'll look at prices as well, because prices are indeed important. So stay tuned for the Mag 600 Flex Showdown. Now, I promised that I would get right into the writing samples. We'll take a look at all those flex nibs that I've gathered for you in a minute. But I think it's important that we look at one important fact about this pen. And it's the following. And I'd like for you to join me on the computer to do this. And where are we? Here we go. Okay. We all know that this was the first version of the Mag 600. It came in that black, black coating. I believe it was ebonite. It had that, that clip, which was a vintage style clip, and the ebonite feed along with that beautiful 14 karat pure flex nib. Now, there were some criticism of that nib. It was still unique and probably first of its kind since vintage pens, but there was some criticism of that nib. So that's the first version. The second version, and I think I have the second version, is this one. You could see that on the Magna Carta site, they refer to it as the Mag 600 reinvented flex nib. So my understanding is that they tweaked the nib a little bit and make it better, okay? And I know that Shack MD has got a comparison between different nibs, the different Mag 600 nibs, and I think one is much better than the other. Like the second generation, if you will, may have corrected a lot of the small criticisms and defects that the first one had. I think I have this one. The pen I have is indeed a Mag 600 in this twilight resin, and I believe this is the one that I have, and this is the one that I purchased at Stilo Stile. There is a, if I can call it that, a third generation, and to what extent it's any different from number 1 and number 2, it's this one. This is the Magna Carta Gold Spot Exclusive 650, and the difference, let me show you where the difference is. Now, does this site show it? I believe it does. Where is it that I saw it? Okay, right here. You see, right next to, right at the side of the nib, they've now put 14K 585. I don't have that on my nib, which leads me to believe that this may be the latest version. And I've got a funny suspicion that this latest version may have been tweaked even further. Having said that, I believe I have number 2. Look, there may be 4 versions. If anybody can shed any light or more light on that, please leave your comments down below and share it with everyone. That way we can make things clear. But that's the best that I could surmise based on what I've seen and what I've seen in terms of YouTube reviews, etc., etc. So that's really the extent of the preliminary comments. And what I propose now is that we get right into the pen. Let's take a brief look at the pen and see what it what it offers. So, okay, so here is the pen. Now, very briefly, one thing, and I've got some notes to share with you. First thing is I prefer the clip on both the first generation, that is that black version, and this second generation with some beautiful resin, as compared to the 650, the Gold Spot Exclusive. This is more, resembles more a vintage type of situation, and so I think that I prefer that, frankly. It's much more vintagey. I can show it to you next to my WATERMAN. As you could see, those 2 little bolts, it evokes a vintage style that I think I appreciate much better. I like the flat top on both sides, frankly. Now, this gold trimming apparently is 24, how do they describe it? One second, I don't want to get it wrong. Twilight resin, that's the resin, with 24K PVD gold-plated trim. Now, what is PVD? Here's the definition I'm reading. PVD, short for physical vapor deposition, is a vacuum coating method used to apply a gold layer to the base metal, used by luxury brands like Rolex and Cartier. So there you go. It's 24K PVD. Those are the gold trimmings. It can be eye dropped or converter, and we'll get to a discussion of the converter in a second. There's that beautiful flex nib, which we'll be taking a closer look at. As you can see, I do not have the inscription 14K 585 on either side, nor do I have an F beneath the Magna Carta stamping or branding. But there you have the nib. It's a number 6 sized ebonite feed, and there you have it. I think it's a beautiful pen. It It sits very nicely in my hands. Larger size. Does it post? Well, I don't think so. I don't think it's made to be posted. It's very clumsy. It's barely sitting there. So anybody who wants to post with this pen, and posting is an absolute necessity, then it's a no-no for you. Posting has never been a problem for me. I just don't post unless it's a very small pen and I need to get some size. And there are several that post very nicely to give me the size. So there you have it. I don't want to get into more details. I mean, the finishing is very nice. The step down is gradual. There's a little bit of a flare there. It's smooth. It doesn't affect the writing at all. I really want to get into the writing samples because we got plenty to look at. So there is a very short, but oh, by the way, I've never had a problem of drying on me. Far from it. Let me just look to see what I see in there, if we see any sealing of any sort. I think there is a cavity there that seals the nib very nicely. At least that's what I see. It's very difficult to capture in the camera. But put it this way, I like the thickness of it all. I like the way that gold band straightens very nicely the top of that cap. So there you have it. How many? Oh, let's do that for those of you who really care. 1.5. So just a little bit more than 1.5, I would say. So that's reasonable. Although I've got to tell you, I've never really paid attention to that. I really don't care how many turns it takes to remove. In fact, sometimes I like it if it's more than one, so it just doesn't slip open. I have some pens that open up really nicely, but they're always on the verge of being opened, and it bothers me. I prefer that if it's got two turns, it's even better for me. So there you have it. I don't want to belabor the point. I want to get to the writing sample. So bear with me. I'm going to set everything up. I'm going to show you all the pens I want to compare this to, and then we'll get right to it. Be right back. Here you are, folks. Just give me a second. There we go. Here are all the pens, or most of the pens, that I want to explore with you. Okay, it's going to take some time, but I think it's worthwhile. We'll go through them all. I'll give you a comparison, and hopefully this could be a resource video for many of you, as much as I will try to share with you as much information that I have. I'm sure there's a lot out there, but here we go. So the objective here is that I've pulled off everything that I have. I've ordered some as well. All the flex nibs or semi-flex nibs, or pretenders, if you will, and they're all here, and I'll tell you which ones are missing. I do not have the Regalia flex nib. Very difficult to get. Couldn't even find one used, and God knows I tried to postpone this video for a long time. Second, I do not have the Good Blue flex pen. I just heard that it might take a little longer to get to me, and by the time I decided that this would go up and be published, it was a little too late to order it. So I have not. I'm going to order it in the future so that we can take a look at that flex nib. I know that Doodle Bud has reviewed it, so you can take a look at some of his videos. He's reviewed that nib and its various versions and prototypes in detail over the years. And I do not, and I regret, and maybe by the time I finish this video, I will have received the Pilot Custom 743 with a FA nib. My mistake is that I purchased the Pilot FALCON soft fine nib, thinking that this Falcon was better flex than an FA nib on the 743, which is, I believe, is a 14 karat gold nib. I've ordered it. At the time that I'm speaking to you in this video right now, I've yet to receive it, but I may very well receive it by the time this video progresses. So I don't want to go back and edit everything. You know, I'm letting you know. If my 743 knocks on the door, well, you know what? We will open that door and bring it in, and I will introduce it as it comes in for you. Those are the ones that are missing. There may be others, and I'd really like to know. If there's others, let me know, and we can do maybe a part 2. Okay? So there you have it. So let's go through it all. First of all, I got the NODDLERS AHAB and the triple tail in these two pens. I have the Odyssey Flex nibs. I've got a medium in titanium, and I've got 2 steel. I've got a broad and a fine. I may very well choose one. We'll stick to the medium titanium one just because it is a little flexier. Okay, but we'll see. Then I've got my KANWRITE Flex nibs, and I believe I have a fine, an extra fine, and I have a medium broad. I think it's a medium, but it writes like a broad. I have my JOWO extra fine and fine. I have my Pilot FALCON pen. I have my STIPULA with a steel flex fine nib. I have down here my beautiful and absolutely gorgeous and forever, ever liked SCRIBO Field of Flex. This thing has surprised me, folks. I recommend it. I know it's pricey. I wish that price point would go down, but it's worth every penny. Then I have this SANTINI with a FLEXY STUB. I have in this Ranga pen and in this Asvine V200 my fountain pen Revolution Ultra Flex nibs. One in the dual toned and one in the chrome, and believe me, there's a difference. Here is my recently received QUILL nib, medium QUILL nib in the PINEIDER Grande Bellezza. I have a series of flex nibs. I have a PELIKAN N140, a PELIKAN M200, a WATERMAN 52.5, and I have another version of that WATERMAN in the gold fill here. And then, of course, here is the majestic and the only one, the Mag 600. So those are the pens that I plan to review with you. We'll do some writing samples and we'll lay them all down, and we'll comment as we write and give you some impressions, and hopefully this will be useful. So I'm going to set up the writing sample and be right back. Okay, so these are the first series of pens that I want to compare this gem with. They are all steel flex nibs, with the exception of one of my OSPREY titanium nibs. Okay, the rest are all steel. I have another tray with some of the gold ones. Fountain Pen Revolution, I don't have the gold versions. I have the steel versions. I believe they're better. But that's in the next tray, because I consider the next tray probably the one that contains the best flex nibs, if you will. Now, I think in order to appreciate the others, we need to do a writing sample of this first, so we can use that as the comparison, if you will, for everything that's coming up. So rather than do it last, I'm going to do it first. Now, I'm going to be using, we're going to be using Tomoe River paper. I think I was tempted to use that what is it, Clairefontaine French lined paper, but I just find that it just doesn't, it just a lot of lines, and it doesn't give me what I want. Okay, so, and I think the best performance of these nibs comes out of this Tomoe River paper. So we're going to try to put as much as possible here, and do something intelligent with this pen. Now, first thing I have to mention to you, this pen does have a tendency to hard start, which leads me to believe that maybe I still have the first version. I'm not sure. I believe I have the second. I was told I have the second generation, but having said that, I also noticed that when I use the converter, I have many more hard starts, as compared to when I eyedropper this. So I've chosen to eyedropper it in the hope that it doesn't give me the hard starts. I'm going to keep this piece of paper on the side because if it does hard start, I have a little trick to get it going again. Now this is going to be a surprise for me as well because I don't know what's going to give me. Okay, so let's get this on the road. So this is the Magna Carta Mag 600, and I think I'm going to do much closer because you've got to be able to appreciate the juiciness of this nib. Okay, this is a 14 karat flex nib, which goes about 300 US. If I don't have the price of any pen, I will put it up on the screen so that you'll be able to see it. Now, what's fascinating about this nib, okay, is that it's almost like a brush. In other words, the flex, a lot of the nibs, you see the flex by the two tines opening up. They open up and they give you that line variation. This thing not only opens up, but the nib actually bends. It flexes. So it's a pure flex nib, in my view. So I don't know if you could see that, but you see it bend? And of course, it gives me a line anywhere from very fine to medium to broad to triple broad. And if I want, it gives me, it's endless. So I think that this nib goes from fine to what one could reference as triple broad. I really do. And now, can it be used as an everyday writer? I have my doubts just because it's very wet and it is a little finicky. But if it ever hard starts, all I do is tap it. Let me just move that. All I have to do is really tap it this way and it gets going again. So it's not a major deal so far anyway. So there it is. Now, what else can I show you? Oh, yes. I just want to show you how see how thick those lines are. And, I'm not good at this. Somebody who is can probably get that line variation even more. So this is my opinion, what you would term as a soft, pure flex. It flexes. The nib actually bends it's almost like writing with a paintbrush. That's what it is. Okay? So here's the Magna Carta. I'm glad it performed. It didn't really hard start anywhere. I'm glad we can do that. So let's compare this to the other ones. The first one that's up is this NODDLERS AHAB, and it's an older version. There may be newer versions of this. One of the things about these pens is that oftentimes they leak and all that. But I got to tell you, I've taken these out. These were maybe a few years old, and they haven't given me problems at all. They've stopped leaking. Maybe those feeds kind of set in, and they're working just fine. So the next pen I have to propose is the NODDLERS AHAB. And here the flex is, the pen is soft, the nib is soft, I should say. It's got no breather holes. It's got a slit right down the middle from the top to the bottom. And it's just a, it gives me some flex, but it's a steel, fairly stiff. So it gives me the finer line much better than some of the other. You know, you could see the line variation. I will put up the price at the top of, you'll see it. So, you know, I can go from a fine to a medium to a broad and even a double broad, but I would say broad. So this thing goes from fine to broad. Okay. It is really very constant, really have no problems with it at all. It's kind of a stiff, I would say stiff flex nib. By the way, the reason why I use, some people might say, why do you keep repeating fountain pen therapy? Apart from the fact that it just promoting my channel, the reason why I do it is I find, first of all, I love when my F's. I just find that the letters in this brief title kind of give me a chance to show you how the pen writes, and it does provide me a chance to give you some line variation. But very quickly you could see how much line variation you have on the Y here, on the H, on the P, on the T's and the A's, and you have very much less with this NODDLERS AHAB. Okay, but keep in mind this is a very reasonably priced pen. Now, some people say they smell. After a while they don't smell anymore. Yes, it's, you know, it's a plasticky sort of a pen, but I find that this probably can give you a better writing experience for everyday office type of writing. This is not a problem, whereas this is more, you know, to enjoy it, if you will, but you can get away with it. The next NODDLERS, okay, we've got to move on here. The next NODDLERS is this triple tail. The triple tail, as you all know, the reason why they call it is it's got two slits, so it ends up dividing the nib in 3 sections. So, and you can see immediately that this is an absolute gusher. It's a steel. It's very soft. It's a gusher in terms of ink flow. Very constant. It could barely give you a fine line. I think that realistically it kind of starts a fine medium and, you know, can give you quite a bit. You know, I'm having a hard time starting at a fine, and as you could see, it can give me easily, I would say, from fine to triple broad easily. Okay. Very wet, but because it starts wide right from the get-go, I find that I have much less line variation with this triple tail, but it is a very nice writing experience. And again, very, 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 very well priced. Okay, here we go. Next is my OSPREY. Now, these OSPREY, I put this in a Ranga. This is the fine. Again, the OSPREY has one slit that runs from top to bottom, but the added cutout on both sides of the nib. You've seen these types with an ebonite feed as well. This is the fine, so this is the OSPREY. Fine steel flex. It's a very stiff nib. It is wet and constant, but it's very stiff. So it gives me an almost extra fine line. I can kind of push it to a medium and even a broad. So, you know, I can what I like about it is it's got this, it bounces right back, if you will. So people who can do, you know, some of this flex calligraphy can probably get more out of this pen than I can. But as you can see, for a everyday writer such as myself and not a flex calligraphy person, I can't push it the right way to give me any line variation, as opposed to the Magna Carta, it just naturally gives you that line variation, as you can see. But anybody who can play with this nib can maybe get that bounce to work, if you will. Okay, so that's the Osprey Fine. Next is probably my favorite, again, Osprey, but except this is the titanium and it's a medium nib. So this is the Osprey, and automatically you feel the difference. This is a medium titanium flex. It's much softer and it's got a bounce, and in my view offers much more line variation. You can get it from fine, you can get it to do medium, and you can get it to do, oh, you know what, close to triple broad anyway. So I would say fine to now, am I exaggerating on the triple broad? I think you get the sense. I don't think so. And you can, you know, really push it nicely. And I wish I could do this much better for you, but I think you get the, and because it's softer, just with my, as an everyday writer, as opposed to a calligrapher, you can see that it offers much more line variation than the fine. Next is my Osprey dual-toned. As you can see, same idea, except this is a broad and it's got a dual-toned nib. Very nice nib, by the way. Now, with this one, you start out broad to begin with, so it's a steel flex, but I gotta tell you, it's fairly stiff, and it doesn't offer, in my view, you know, much line variation. It starts out broad and it kind of stays there. Yes, if you do a light, you can get it from fine to medium, you know, fine, medium, and then broad. But it's very difficult to get an initial fine. You've got to go nice and light. But I guess if you go lightly, you can get a fine line. But you know what? At the end of the day, I don't think that it's more than, I mean, you still have to write. So I think it starts off a medium and it goes to a triple broad. Okay, there you go, the SD Osprey. Okay, so we've completed, sorry about that, we've completed the Osprey offerings. Let's go to my next page. What have I got for you? Next is KANWRITE. KANWRITE is a little bit the same thing as OSPREY. I'm even wondering whether or not it's KANWRITE that makes the nibs for OSPREY. This is a fine flex KANWRITE dual tone. So this is a KANWRITE steel fine, actually extra fine, and it's stiff, very thin, fairly wet, however, very constant. So it gives you the, you know, that extra fine line that you can push to medium, maybe even broad. So again, this is the type of pen that if you are a calligrapher, it's a little scratchy. So you see it's kind of tearing the paper. But if you are a calligrapher, it's got that nice, it bounces back at you. But it's, look, it's grabbing the paper. So it's a little too fine in my view. I think it can give you from extra fine to a broad, to a double broad easily. It may need some polishing just to make it a little bit smoother. Right now it's just eating at that paper. There you go. But it gives you that very nice fine line. So that's the extra fine. The next one is a KANWRITE fine nib. And you can feel it right away that it does have bounce and much more flex to it. Very wet, and you know, if you know what you're doing, you can really get some line variation. Oh, I'm just railroading there. So you know, you can almost go from extra fine to a medium to a fine and to a, it's definitely a double broad and maybe even a triple broad. So you can go anywhere from fine, and even if you write lightly extra fine, to a medium, to a triple broad. And for everyday writing, you can get a little more line variation with this fine KANWRITE. There you go. Next, this is my KANWRITE Kingfisher. I think this has a broad. It's not marked, but you know, if it's a medium, it's got a big tip, so I would categorize this as broad. Take a look at that. So as you could see, I mean, it starts off as a double broad automatically. Can you really call it a flex nib? Well, we'll see in a second. It is a little soft, but I don't think that it's a flex. I don't know if you could see that, but I don't see any flexing. I mean, yeah, I could write lightly and go from fine to medium, then to, you know, it does give me more broad and maybe even triple broad. So it can go from medium, but look at the M. I mean, it's not, it starts out as a broad and it goes to triple broad, in my view. So it gives you a much thicker line right from the get-go, but can't be used on an everyday basis. Okay? Again, the prices are all up on the screen. I will put them all up. Let me just take a sip of water. Sorry about that. Oh, spilled some. Okay. Okay, what's next? Is this JOWO Flex. This is the extra flex. The difference with this one is that this has a breather hole. They go get the flex by giving it that little notch on both sides. It's got a plastic feed, and that's a JOWO branded Delta because it's on this Delta Intesa. So this is the JOWO extra fine steel flex. It's got kind of a semi-stiff nib. This is a type of nib that it's certainly very wet. It's the type of nib that the more you use, the more it kind of settles in. But you can see that you can go from extra fine to fine. You can get it to do medium. And I think if you, broad. So I would say extra fine to broad is the extent of it. But very nice, very smooth, writes very nicely. And obviously, maybe less line variation, but beautiful everyday writer. So it does give you a little bit of more bounce than some of the stiffer fine flexes, but it's not nearly as, I mean, you can't compare it to the mag, okay, to the mag 600. We understand each other. Now, this is the same nib. It's the JOWO Fine Flex. Is that an ebonite feed? No, that's a plastic feed. So this is the JOWO, and you can feel the difference immediately. So this is the fine steel, and it's softer and bouncier and much wetter, if there is such a word. So you can get, I think they call it a fine, but it starts off as a medium, as you could see. You can then go and get a broad out of this. Can you get a double broad? Yeah, I guess. So, I mean, if you really, write softly, that, that is not a fine, but let's say call it a fine, and I think it gives you a double broad. That's the way I would. And very nice everyday writer. And let me just see if I could. But you can see that fine line is really not fine. In my view, it's more like a medium. So, you have to write really lightly to get a fine out of this thing. But again, it's maybe because I've broken it in. So as you broke, it's like this, it starts to bend on you, and it opens up nicer, and it gets a little flexier. It's like your muscles. It gets warmed up. And once it gets warmed up, well, you end up writing with a much thicker line, but it's definitely thicker than the JOWO Extra Fine. Okay? So there you have it. But keep in mind, look at the subject pen. With very little effort, it's giving me all that line variation. So far, some interesting nibs, but not, in my view, nothing spectacular yet. So I finished this first tray, and what I'll do is I will introduce to you my second tray. just put that away. And the second tray, I will start with the steel pen, which I don't think is much of a flex. In fact, it was a little bit disappointing. Maybe I should have gotten the gold. It's this STIPULA steel fine flex, which is fairly stiff, wet. By the way, all of these nibs are wet, okay? Some of them are gushers, but this one's wet. Very constant as well. It's got a little bit of bounce. Okay. So, you know, you can write a fine line. You can write a medium line. You can push it to a double broad, I think. So I think this thing goes from fine to medium to broad, double broad, and I think I can push a triple broad out of it. Well, I say that it was disappointing just because I thought I was going to get a much softer nib. But again, I've got a feeling that the more I use this pen, the softer it's going to get. But, you know, on the other hand, it allows you to start soft and thin and provide you with that line variation. And again, if you are a good calligrapher that knows how to go into a word and, you know, get that flex out of it, then you will get a line variation. It's just not going to be, you know, like this thing where, you know, the line is always the same, whether it's up or down, okay? So that's the STIPULA. Now, I think I'm going to get into what I would call the heavy hitters. So we've finished with some nice versions here. You know, I think they're all very nice writers. You have all the prices up on the screen, so you can, but I think now we're going to get into, apart from the fountain pen revolution, which I think is just fabulous, the rest are really gold nibs. So we should see a difference. It would not be surprising to see a difference. So there you have it. No, we're not going to write on this side because I don't want to mess it up. So we'll skip a couple of pages, and that way we get a clear picture of what we're doing. Now, let me just close up again. I don't know where to start here, but I think I'm going to start with this, the least favorite, which is this FALCON Pilot. I'm going to be reviewing this pen. I just was so disappointed when I got it. It's so light and flimsy. It's thin. It's small. I know it's iconic, but I was just expecting a little more from Pilot. Maybe it's just me. So this is the Pilot FALCON pen. The nib is, how can I describe it? It's 14 karat, and it's stiff but bouncy, in the sense that here again, somebody who knows what they're doing can go from that fine line, and then you can push it and get some line variation out of it. Now, you know, like I said, this is not really meant to be a flex nib, I don't think, but it does give you that line variation. The pen is very precise, though. It does give you a very nice line, almost extra fine. It can give you that medium line, and it can give you a broad line. So I would say it goes everywhere from extra fine to broad, maybe even double broad. And it is, of course, a very nice everyday writer. And you can see, as you know, anybody who knows how to push it can kind of feed and get some line variation out of it. Very nice. But not what I expected. Next. I think the next one, and now we're getting into another gold nib, is this STIPULA (18-karat) STUB. Sorry, that's me. STUB Flex. Very soft. Okay, very, very, very soft nib. But it's thick because it's a stub. So, yeah, if you're really light, you can get a fine. You can, of course, get a medium. You can, of course, get a broad. And you can, of course, get a triple broad out of it, or a stub, if you will. So this thing can go anywhere from extra fine to, I would say, triple broad. But because it's a stub, it offers line variation right from the get-go. You know, it gives you a fine line this way, but a much thicker line that way. So theoretically, if you know what you're doing, you can get a fine, you know, I shake, but you can see that, you know, it's hard to get a fine line out of this pen, you know, because it is a stub, okay? But very, very, very flexy, soft, soft, soft 18-karat nib. Beautiful pen. Just an absolutely very nice pen. Very well priced. The next one is this very surprising PINEIDER QUILL nib. I mean, I will be reviewing the pen in detail. I really love this nib section. The nib, why isn't it cooperating? Wish it would. Okay, come on, camera. Okay, well, it is. I just want to show you. You see that? This thing is bending like my Mag 600. So it not only detines, now this is a medium. It's a 14-karat medium nib. And I will in the future, now that I know this quill nib is really, really nice, I will get a fine. They're just the fine quill nibs are double, or fine quill nibbed pens are double the price. I got this on eBay at a reputable retailer for like, I think, $250 American. But the fine nibbed version of this is double the price. But the Flex, you know, starts from medium, I think. You know, if you're very light. But look at how that quill nib is indeed a quill. I got to tell you, it starts off at medium, and it gives you probably not more than double broad, I would say, but extremely soft. So soft like a brush. So far, only this nib and the Mag 600 feel that way. The others, let me just show you what I mean. Even if I take my titanium, the titanium OSPREY, what I'm doing here, the flex is the tines are opening up and it's giving me that line variation, but there's really no flex in the nib per se. Just the tines are opening up to give me a wider line, but the tines are not bending. They're not bending like a paintbrush, whereas the Mag 600 is not only opening up, but the nib is actually bending. And I'm getting the same thing from this QUILL nib. You could see that the nib is actually bending. I'm just afraid to spring it. But it's so intimidating because it is so soft. A little bit, it's like soft like my PELIKAN M1000 broad. The same feeling, intimidating. It kind of writes on its own. Sorry about that. I just messed that up. But there you have it. So let me just go back here and do my best to give you some of these S. And again, I'm not the best at this, but you can see that it's very thick, wet, juicy. Whoa, what a beautiful pen. Very, very nice pen. Recommended, folks. I really recommend it. Okay, what do we got next? Next is these, we're going to go into the vintage. This is the PELIKAN N140. What I like about this nib, and it is a 14 karat nib, is that it's got stiff, but it's got a spring back, a springy back kind of a situation. Let me explain. So for those of you who want to write lightly, no problem. It gives you a very fine line. But if you want to press on it, you know, you can go from fine to medium to double broad, broad, double broad, and maybe even triple broad. So this goes from fine, maybe even extra fine, to, I would say, easily a two broad, double broad. And I think for those who know how to use the springiness of the lettering, this pen can provide that. Very nice. And that's the beauty of these, you know, these Flex Nibs vintage. I got the same situation with this Waterman. So this is a Waterman. Whoa. Okay, it stopped writing. You know, it gives you a very fine line. almost extra fine, but so it's stiff with a springy back, with a spring back sort of a feeling. And you can see that from the nib. I mean, take a look at that. It's got that beak, and that thing can bend, and the springs right back. So you can go from an extra fine to a fine to a medium and to a broad, or even a triple broad. So this thing goes from an extra, no, oh, I'm sorry, extra fine to easily a triple broad. So, take a look at that. And for those of you who can do this better than I, you can definitely see the line variation there. Definitely see it. Then I have my favorite of the vintage. This is the 52.5. Look at that. Boy, stiff, but with wide spring back. And it's much easier to get it. So, you know, it can give me that extra fine line. It can give me a medium line. It can give me a triple broad, I think, at the end of the day, easily. Starts to give you that flexy line variation, similar, I would argue, to the Mag 600. Again, you can no railroading here, folks. Isn't that fantastic? Just absolutely fantastic. Now, I do have another one, but I'm not going to show this to you. I'm not going to do it. I think this is the M200. This is just a broad, soft nib. It's not a flex nib, so I'll skip that one. Next, okay, this is amongst my favorite for a couple of reasons. This is a fountain pen revolution. I think the reason why I like this nib, this is the extra fine ultra flex dual toned, is because of the price. So you can get very fine line, but easily press on it for it to give you some line variation. Fountain pen revolution, ultra flex. Look at that. Really, really nice. So it's got wide line variation. And you can use it as a stiff pen, or you can get it to spring at you by just pushing it a little bit. So, you know, it's, look at this, extra fine, fine, can go from triple broad if I want. You know, I can write a very fine line if I want, but if I just press on it a little more, then it starts giving me that beautiful flex line variation. So very very thick. Very fine, very thick. So easily from extra fine to, I would say, even easily a triple broad, if not even a quadruple. Okay, very nice. And the price is roughly what? If you get it with the ebonite feed and you get it with a Bach unit, so you can put it on other pens, I think it's between, what is it, $70 and $80, which is, you know, far cry from hundreds. So very nice. Now this is the dual toned, and in my view the same nib but with the chrome finish is even flexier. I don't know if you could see that. Chrome Ultra Flex. It definitely can give you an extra fine line. It can give you a medium line, a broad line, and a quadruple broad line. So anywhere between F, EF, and 4B, in my opinion. So I can write lightly with it. And rarely railroads on you. Very rarely. Very, very nice. I recommend this fountain pen revolution. I don't know how many times I've got to say it. And I've got 4 of them now, and I put them all in this beautiful Asvine V200, which I think is the pen of the year, the Chinese pen of the year, because it acts like a eyedropper and not a converter. So the feed is just constantly wet. And if you buy the nib with that ebonite feed, wow. I heard that the gold version of this nib is not as good. So stay away from gold. Why pay the extra money? You don't need it. Now, my runner-up, and maybe it's just because the pen is so beautiful, I think is this Feel the Flex Scribo. So this is the Scribo Fine Flex. I think that it's not only springy, very soft, and it's kind of in between. If I would have to compare it to the Mag 600 compared to the Quill nib, I would say the Quill nib, in terms of softness and how that flex actually bends the nib, number 1, number 2, number 3. This is the softest and bends the most. This one bends the second most, and this bends the third most. I don't know if I'm getting my point across. Yes, it writes a very wide line. Very difficult to get fine out of it. I think you start at medium. Definitely go to broad. It, you know, triple broad. So I would say fine to triple broad easily. Although it does have the tendency to write with a very wide line just because it's so soft that, you know, you're bound to push it. But it is a flex nib. Look at that. Beautiful. Just absolutely beautiful. So SCRIBO is right in there, folks. In my view, the 3 best or the 4 best is this mag. I put the SCRIBO second, my fountain pen revolution third, and my PINEIDER fourth. Those to me, I mean, the flex on the vintage to me is number 2, so I should erase that. You know, if you get, and I don't even have the best, okay, and I'm trying to collect them. But when I compared the flex number 1, number 2, some people would argue that this is number 1, the vintage. Number 3 is the SCRIBO. My fountain pen revolution, just beautiful. And then comes that quill nib. Now, looking forward to see if I receive my custom Marushi 743 with a FA nib. If I receive it, you'll see it. If I don't, it's because I didn't receive it. And stay tuned for part 2. So, oh, I just wanted to show you how this nib, it's not only widens, the nib actually bends. Okay? It actually does bend. A little bit like a paintbrush. Just like my quill nib. And it's a very different from the beauty of these things. And even better with the more hook one is that this thing can go from very fine writing to that's the beauty of these things, because it's got that spring back. Now, maybe it's because I can't play with it as much as, you know, some of these calligraphers can. This thing doesn't allow you to have control over the thin line. I mean, I'm really going easy here. And take a look at how wet it is. You know what I'm saying? The ink just sputes. I can do it, but not as easily as I can with my vintage nib. Can I do it with my SCRIBO? Even then, you see, it's not an extra fine line. It's already a medium. And if I press, it's much thicker. What about my PINEIDER? Even less, because this is a medium nib. So I would have to try the fine nib. But man, this is springy. Oh, just springy, springy, springy. Soft, 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 soft. What about my fountain pen revolution? This is probably the one that resembles most that the feeling of that vintage, because I can get a thinner line if I want, or I can quickly triple it. Okay, so this is closest to vintage, much closer than my Mag 600. Just because that Mag 600 bends like a brush. There you go, folks. I got to tell you, it's been a lot of fountain pen therapy, probably more for me than for you. I try to show you all kinds of things here. Hopefully you can appreciate what I've done. I mean, I'm having an absolute ball, I got to tell you. And I'm looking forward to finding a regalia. I'm looking forward to finding that blue, good blue. And by now, we will know, or maybe after this, you will know if I got my Pilot Custom 743 with an FA nib, because I hear that's really soft and really nice. And hopefully I will get it and end the video with it. But if not, this is it, folks. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've understood or appreciated what I've tried to do here to get you to explore these fountain pen nibs or these flex nibs. And you know what? You don't need to get into the expensive ones. Trust me, fountain pen revolution, you'll be very, very happy with it. NODDLERS will give you a nice writing experience. So will KANWRITE, and so will OSPREY. But if you have to choose from the cheaper ones, I would definitely spend my money on a fountain pen revolution nib. You can just buy the nib with a box setting or with a JOWO setting. This one has a box setting. Okay? No, sorry. This has a JOWO setting, and this one as a box setting, because you can get the Asvine V200. And I have three others like this. Now I have the red. I have red ink, green ink, blue ink, and black ink. So I can, with this, I can put, because you can buy it with the Bach unit, you can put the box setting in. I understand that you can probably even buy the pen with neither Bach or JOWO, but maybe with a fountain pen revolution unit on one of their pens. It may even be cheaper. You should check it out. But for 70, 80 bucks, you can put it on a very nice pen. I mean, these days they're all JOWO nibs or Bach nibs. And you can you can get a nice, beautiful pen that you enjoy that has a JOWO unit or a Bach unit and put in the flex nib. So you've transformed your pen from an ordinary, medium, fine, broad, even a stub, or a 1.1 or a 1.5, and you can, all of a sudden, you can add to it a beautiful, just a beautiful, nice, enjoyable flex nib. I think it's a no-brainer. I really think it's a no-brainer, especially at that price. So I will end it there. Thank you very, very much for having joined me. I hope that's been fun and useful. And we'll see you sometime soon. There's other reviews going up. The following week, we'll go back to unless there's another major surprise, we'll go back to the regular weekly recap format as you've known it. And work in progress is that other nib video that I promised you. We'll be looking at everything but flex. Okay? Grazie molto. Subscribe, comment, thumbs up. Ciao.